Welcome to Nacht, Waffen pilot with Penny Bradley. And today we have a special. We have Ileana, the Star Traveler, and we have John Warner IV. And I have bios on both. And I'm going to do ladies first. So, Ileana, the Star Traveler, is a certified Native American shaman, psychic, crystal healer, energy healer, past life regression, and soul retrieval practitioner, hypnosis practitioner, and an Akashic Records reader. Ileana is a successful self-published author on Amazon of a book called Crystal Grids, The Art of Healing with Crystals. This book teaches about various healing crystal modalities and how to work with crystal grids in order to manifest your success and achieve your goals in life. Through self-hypnosis protocols, Ileana was able to learn much about her secret space program experiences of being an SSP asset working on the Mars bases for the planetary corporations in their cybernetic labs, creating biological drug serums, biological human cyborgs, Neuralink implants, and operating regenerative technologies that are the holographic medical pods and the Meditech units. Through doing past life regressions, Ileana learned that she is an L Pleiadian hybrid who is a star traveler. The L race of extraterrestrials are 12th dimensional beings who embody both female and male forms. They are able to change their biology to look like different beings and change the forms of their bodies, etc. They are a race of beings who can change matter on a biological scale, and they have biological living light ships that they travel in. The L race are negotiators, and they help to bring peace to different planetary systems and to prevent wars in galaxies. Throughout her life, Ileana has had recall memories of experiencing having reptilian abductions, especially since her mid-20s, where she had been taken into underground bases in Europe, where her blood and immune system had been experimented on with nanite technologies to try and kill her. Yet she survived and is now disclosing what happens in reality with ET abductions, ET contact experiences, and secret space program service. Welcome, Ileana.
Thank you, Penny.
Let me read John's real quick. And I forgot to add the two here that you asked. Sorry about that. The son of retired Senator, unfortunately now deceased, John W. Warner III, Republican of Virginia, former Secretary of the Navy and Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, KBE, and Catherine Mellon, banking heiress and daughter of philanthropist Paul Mellon, OSS, KBE. Some of you will know what those stand for. Warner says growing up in a family that had a seat at many of the most historically significant tables led to his insatiable quest to find and reveal hidden truths behind world events. An avid researcher of revisionist alternative history, Warner began writing this the book series. The book series is called Little Anton, and I've read it, and it's fabulous. I recommend it. Warner began writing this book series during a 2-year-long recovery from a racing car accident. Yes, the man sitting with us this evening or afternoon, depending on where you live, is a former race car driver. His extensive research for Little Anton and Lion, Tiger, Bear, which is still in progress, evolved into a gripping historical narrative that reveals hidden truths about technological advancements and prominent leaders active in the World War II era, including Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Walter Gerlach, Ferdinand Porsche, and Winston Churchill. There's also mention of Franklin Roosevelt and A. Mellon, who was part of Alcoa Aluminum at the time. So it's historical fiction, but it's more historical than fiction. And I'd like to welcome you, John.
Thank you.
So I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. So, and my producer is sitting there with a shit-eating grin on his face because he knows this means it's going to go crazy. So, anyway, John sent me the PDF copy of his book, and it took me a while to read it. It's 1,010 pages.
Bit of a juggernaut.
And it's a very compelling story. It's a little confusing at the first because he follows different people. But eventually, by the third book, all the people come together. So it makes sense. Ileana has also given me a copy of her book, and I'm not personally into the crystal part, but I think that she did a fine job with it. So if you're into crystals, I think you should consider her book as well. So I think what we have in common here is an interest in SSP. So I think we're going to start off with Ileana's experiences in space, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So my experiences started here on Earth, actually, from 2 to 10. I had been abducted by reptilians, Black Drowso and Sharab Invictus. So that's where it started in Europe. I was born in the Ukraine. When I was like in my bed, I would see a black tunnel or a portal open up in my room. And I would see these black 14, 16 foot tall reptilians come in, take me by my hands, walk me through the portal to underground bases. And that's not in the Ukraine, it's outside Ukraine. So they have ability to open up a portal and take you anywhere they want. And it was a black portal. And when we would come out of the portal, I would see a cavern system. We would walk through the cavern system. It would open up somewhere in a base. There was human personnel. There was the reptilians, both types. I would see children that were in cages, children chained up to the walls. I would see these metallic-like beds where the children would be put on and they would be experimented on. What they did with me was infect my blood with nanite technology, which ruined my autoimmune system. It almost felt like my blood was sizzling. It was supposed to kill me, but it didn't. I survived that. So that's where all this started from, with the abductions, with the reptilians. So I have a healthy skepticism against certain reptilians. That's just because of my experiences. I don't judge them. Some are positive beings, some are not so much. There's both types. There's many different species of reptilians, just to disclose fully. And then in my 20s, I started remembering my L Pleiadian lifetimes with the L race experiences and being on their biological ships, learning energy, what energy is, how energy works, healing modalities, how to manipulate energy, how to biologically. Yep.
This L species, is this the same race that we know in the Bible as Elohim?
No. It's not the Elohim. It's a totally different race. They're 12th dimensional. They don't have wings. They're about anywhere from 8 feet to 24 feet tall. but they're not angelic. They're not of the angel species.
Okay.
So they have their own biological ships. They could think of Star Trek and Q, right? So that's the type of beings they are. They just don't manipulate space, matter, and time. They're not manipulative beings. They're here to help people, to stop wars, to negotiate treaties, to help people advance in their spiritual evolution, if you will. So they taught me a lot about biology and healing, a lot about just really shifting matter in timelines and manifesting positive things in timelines and changing the future even to some degree. So that's what I learned from them in my mid-20s. And then when I was 29, I started remembering the SSB memories of working on Mars in the cybernetics labs, creating the biological drug serums, the human biological cyborgs, Neuralink implants in my brain, and that recently through a hypnosis session, I found out that's Nordic technology. Also how these med beds or holographic medical pods, that's the more correct term for it, how they work. And they work on plasma and crystalline technology. So it's a combination of plasma.
I had no idea how they worked because the technology I was exposed to worked on a variant of black goo.
Yeah, no, these don't work on a variant of goo. They work on plasma and crystalline technology energy, how they're activated, and they put the person inside the pod, and it has sometimes a cylindrical metal base, silver or green or blue, and the lid closes over it. And it's sort of like a glass substance, but it's not glass, it's something different. And then you're in a stasis, you're floating in stasis, so you're asleep. And it regenerates whatever it needs to regenerate, organs, DNA, tissues, traumatized brain issues, anything. It could regenerate anything, literally. And again, this is run on a combination of plasma and crystalline energy frequencies. The frequencies everywhere in the pod, and the pod is connected to holographic interfaces outside the pod. So if a technician has to program it and look at something, they can do that externally, or the pod can just do the self-healing how it needs to without needing to monitor it. It really depends on what they're fixing and healing. It can even bring back your natural DNA template when you were the healthiest in your life. It can regenerate that. So that's the holographic medical pods. There's the portable Meditech units. Say if a soldier, SSB asset, soldier, operative, if they've been injured out in battle, the Meditech unit leaves the cybernetics lab. It's pre-programmed to the location of the person because they're wearing the smart suit. So it's anti-grav, it levitates to them. It opens up, it puts the person into the Meditech unit, stabilizes their life force energy, puts them in stasis until they can get to the holographic medical pod to be fully healed. So it's kind of like a temporary transport, and it keeps you alive. It keeps you stable. Even if you're on the brink of dying, it still keeps you alive. And it's connected to all the functions of the smart suit that you're in. That monitors your temperature, monitors your life force signs, everything. So your smart suit keeps you alive and healthy when you're outside, inside. It's your basic uniform, even in the SSB and the planetary core bases. And it has nanotechnology, so it controls your clothing. It can make it look like anything you want, size. It basically conforms to any shape of body fit. It stops you from going to the bathroom, so you don't need to go to the bathroom. It controls your fluids, controls your biology while you're wearing it. So it basically keeps you in shape, keeps you healthy, and monitors everything, who you are, your biology. So that's what I did 16 back, so through the Quantum Leap time travel program, and it's time dilation. So it could literally dilate time between Earth, Mars. What was like 11 years really was 60 years of service, but it could dilate the quantum time matrix itself. So to you, it seems like you only did 11 years, but you did 60 years, because again, they could loop time. They could change the matrix of time itself if they want. And again, I did most of my work in the cybernetics labs. I created ET human hybrids. I know a lot about genetics. I know a lot about manipulating human biology. That was my work there. Again, operating the holographic medical pods, Meditech units, and creating the cyborgs, augmenting them with different types of implants and biological drug serums to acclimate them to living on Mars and other planets. So that's basically what I did in the secret space program. The bulk of my 16 back, I was in Dark Fleet, Nacht, Waffen, Reger. I was trained as an assassin to haul people into the planetary barge prisons, where I saw them tortured, swimming in blood, in their own liquids. Since they defected from Nachtwaffen or other SSB groups, and that was kind of the punishment. Then they were put into the regen tanks. All their physical scars were healed, but their mental traumas remained. So that was the Nachtwaffen part. And before I was put on Mars, I remember being on lunar space operations and seeing this huge base, circular base with 40 levels. That's where they train you about the different ET species, what you can expect when you're out in space. So it's like a 2-year training, basically, to acclimate you to different ET species, cultures, languages, behavioral protocols. So you know how to behave properly when you're meeting different cultures and species and when you're on different planets. So that's the acclimation adjustment part before you actually go into your service. So that was Mars. And I also remember being on several different space platforms that move around. They have engines, and that's Planetary Corp owned. And again, sometimes the biological human cyborgs, their implants need adjustments. So I would be transported on the stations, if you will, to adjust things.
What is a biological cyborg as opposed to a regular one?
Okay, so a human biological cyborg is a human being that has all their organs, but they're augmented with various implants. It could be to make them faster, it could be to make them stronger, to be smarter, but they have their organs intact. So they're not fully cybernized. They're not fully cyborg. Their organs are still there. And a cyborg.
What's the difference between that and what the Kruger people are calling enhanced humans?
Enhanced humans could be anything really, from having implants, and that still makes you a cyborg, or almost being a full cyborg where you don't have your organs anymore. Everything is inorganic and cybernetic. So organs are replaced with cybernetics, limbs, bones, anything, because when you're cybernized, you could either choose to have your organic components with augments of implants, or, you know, if something's wrong with your organs, you can choose to have replicated cybernetic organs.
Do you actually get to choose this, or is it chosen for you?
Well, it really, like, if they can't for some reason regenerate your organs in the medical pods or the holographic medical pods or regen tanks, then sometimes it's cybernetics that you get. If for some reason they can't fix you completely, then you get the cybernetics. That's the other alternative. Or you can end up in a clone. Your soul can be taken out of your body and put in a clone or an avatar body, which is a synthetic body. So there's so many different ways your soul can end up being in different bodies, male or female. So that's what I was doing in these labs. But I worked with purely the biological human cyborgs. I did not replace organs with cybernetics. So I only did Neuralink implants and other implants on the body, because I believe still keeping some organic parts, that soldiers deserve to be organic to some extent. So I did not participate in full cybernization. That was done by other technicians in other sections of these labs. I just did the implants, and to make sure everything functioned correctly with the human body. Yeah, so that's kind of my.
Don, you have any questions?
Holy cats. Not sure where to begin. I do incorporate some of this information in my new book, Lion, Tiger, Bear. It's in the 1942 Desert War, but it's about a German airship base, and my team of characters steal this anti-gravity German airship, and they do encounter medbed technology. They do encounter portals and some time travel and some Aldebarans, which are known as the Giza intelligences. I think that's going back to where they were supposedly an Aldebaran base underneath the Giza Plateau. And the word is they had some cross-pollination with the Germans in World War II and before World War II, probably along with some of the other regressives. It makes sense to me, and that's sort of how I wrote it. But my characters do travel to Agartha sort of by mistake. Even though they're in an airship, they spend a lot of time tunneling underground due to unforeseen, circumstances. But I have to put it in more of a mild setting rather than what you're talking about, so that it flows with the narrative a little better. But I get into some hard stuff in my book. There's satanic ritual abuse. There's a chapter in there that my wife refuses to read again. So I touch upon some of this stuff, and I mold it into a World War II type narrative. But it all makes sense, the history of it. And that's sort of my angle, being a historian, military historian, and otherwise. And I talk about breakaway Germans in Antarctica. I don't show it, but there's a conversation between two Ahnenerbe SS guys, Ernst Schaefer and Edmund Gear, with my crew. And, they're getting a download of information of what's really going on in the war. And so it's been very interesting, but I do touch upon some of these technologies. I think it's important for people to understand.
My next question is, how did you find out about these technologies, since you are not one of us who survived them?
From you and Ileana and everyone else.
Okay, so you've been listening for a long time.
Oh yeah, probably 8 years now.
Okay.
8 or 9 years to you guys. I can't remember the first time when I did it, but I was, researching all kinds of stuff. But over the years, over the last 20 years, it's all kind of intertwined rather nicely. I was in an argument today. I'm on a forum, email forum with some physicists and, other people. And one of the physicists said, I need facts and I'm not running on, it's like, dude, if you're waiting for facts and, what's a fact? A Pentagon briefing, a Washington Post article, is that a fact? Does that make it a fact? I mean, you're going to be waiting forever to figure this stuff out. You've got to use imagination, which, and that's a more of a mainstream forum, but they do get into all the tic tac stuff, and my cousin Chris Mellon, and everyone's sort of slamming each other pretty hard. It's a rough forum, but it's very interesting. And I try to weave some of this stuff, that we're talking about into that, but you have to do it slowly because it'll just burst people's eardrums and their frontal lobes will swell and they'll start to sweat.
Yeah, my secret group on Facebook, I introduced them to the concept of Homo capensis yesterday, and they're having heads bursting.
Which one is that?
Huh?
Is this different from Homo galacticus?
No, it's an Earth race.
Oh, it's another separate.
Yeah, it's the species. The species name for the folks that everybody else calls the elite. So
So that you're implying that I am part of that.
If
I don't know.
it's
I don't feel any
where
different for anyone else, other than my zany imagination, you know.
yeah, well,
Um,
I'm not pointing fingers because my understanding is that the SSP folks and the super soldiers were all chosen because they had that heritage. So it's somewhere between 10 and 15% of the population. So it's not like you're a freak or anything if you are, just different.
well, I've always been different. That much is true, you know.
So I'm
But
not
no, it's
picking
true.
at you. It was a concept that they had not yet had, and I introduced it. And there's this thread with like 80 comments, and most of them are people freaking out at me, not understanding what I said. And it's okay because they probably never will.
Do you think that the Great Awakening of people are mostly in that group?
I think some people are going to wake up to some things, and the majority are not. And I think that's just the way it is. And so I speak, and occasionally I'll get frustrated and just dump a bunch of information, and then they'll sit there and go for the next month until I do another drop of something else.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what happens, isn't it, Ileana?
Oh, the med beds. All that lovely disinformation that Trump just released the med beds. They're out and anybody can get access to them.
Yeah.
And also that, you know, the US military secretly flying out sick people to use the meds in Australia, that Galactic Consciousness report. When I read that, I'm like, where is this coming from? Why are people...
It's coming from wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's wishful thinking. I'm still a realist and a very logical person. Just because I experienced working with them on Mars, until I see it in every health center, every hospital released to the public, when I see it is when I'll believe it. Because Planetary Corp has a 100-year release cycle. So when I looked at their plans, that's not the first thing to be released to the human public. It's the Neuralink implants. It's the cybernetics technology that's like on a 30, 50-year plan of release. DARPA is doing that already. Elon Musk is doing Neuralink. So we're seeing the first stages.
Elon Musk is definitely doing Neuralinks.
And Neura, not Neuro. Neuro is 300 more years advanced than Neura.
I had a chip behind my left ear that connected me to the ship's computer where I was navigator. And his device attaches to the same part of the brain, but his device doesn't appear to be anywhere near as sophisticated.
Yeah, it's not. Because Neuralink implants, they're cybernetic nanotech with nanofiber gold that open up. It has an energy core. The implants, they're injected through the skin. They go through the bloodstream, past the blood-brain barrier, go to whatever side of the head they need to. The energy core opens up. The nanofiber stuff connects to your neurons and your axons. The implants are activated, and they can teach you anything you want. They can give you any download or upload of information from the databases, the holographic technology, anything. It allows you to communicate with other SSP
assets. When I was on
Mars,
I had an implant that was star-shaped, like an 8-point star, over my right eye on my forehead. And it gave me a readout in front of me. Nobody else could see it. It was completely in my mind, but I perceived it as external. And it would give me a readout on air temperature, wind speed, And if I encountered a biological, it would give me a description of that species and whether it was considered hostile or not. And if it was a human, it would tell me which faction they were affiliated with.
Mm-hmm. Well, those Neuralink implants do the same things. It also allows you to remotely pilot and control ships. It allows you to talk to other SSP assets who have the Neuralink implants, and it trains you. It can provide you with any informational download to do any type of a job. You don't need to be trained for months at a time by a human to do a job who's well versed in it. The implant gives you all the information about any job you need to know how to do, downloads the information to your brain, and you're ready to do the job. It basically is your trainer.
I was in Nacht, Waffen, and I was in Kruger. I don't have memories of being in any of the others. And that particular technology was not available in either one of those. So this is something different.
Well, it was these
the audience needs to know that the different factions use different technologies from each other, that they are basically operating like countries on Earth would, that those are national state secrets.
Yes.
And they're not going to just give them to planet Earth because they're national state secrets.
Yeah, classified means classified, like top level classification. I had a hypnosis regression done recently, and the hypnosis practitioner asked, so when are the med beds coming? Not for another 100 years, and if anybody tries to smuggle it off, Mars Planetary Corp, they might get killed for it if they try to bring this openly to the public. They'll be killed for it.
Getting killed would be probably the kindest thing that they would do to them. Yeah.
Other, maybe torture even. But the answer was not coming yet, and anybody who tries to get that tech out to take it from Mars, from Planetary Corp, they'll likely end up dead or missing. Off somewhere, you know, you're gone. That's it. That's the consequence of trying to get this out.
No one will ever be charged for it.
No. You know, secret...
Well, there are certain crimes on Earth that only the witnesses ever get charged.
Yeah. I mean, assassins come in.
John?
Yeah.
You know that there are some crimes on Earth that only the witnesses ever get charged?
Yeah, I think injustice is rife everywhere. Corruption. I don't think there's a country on Earth that's not corrupt. But you know, this is an excellent sort of dovetail into, since I want to make sure your viewers know I'm not an SSP veteran or claim to be, but I know a lot about various things, and it makes sense to me. The one thing, you know, I'd like to ask both of you, being the divine feminine, you know, how do you see the next 25 years going forward as far as the SSP veterans are concerned? And the reason I ask that is because something you said, you know, Penny and I have had email discussions, and, you know, she's hopefully going to contact in the desert in 2022. And I was thinking, because I was reviewing the past, you know, these past conferences and things like that, and I could be wrong, but I think the general consensus is a lot of them are just moving slowly towards more, you know, benevolent, you know, consciousness workshops and, you know, holistic baking classes, and, and, you know, it's part of human nature to kind of, if something's a little bit too scary and horrible, to kind of drift away from it. And I've seen that over the years. I mean, the last 20 years, you can sort of see that. And I tell people, you know, when I write people or I interview, it's like, you know, back in the 90s, when they were talking about grays and abductions and MyLabs and these things, genetics and what have you, people thought, you know, Greer, Dolan, and all these guys were nuts, you know. And fast forward 25 years, you know, later, And here we are, and everyone's like, oh, the SSP veterans, oh my God, they're all crazy. And it's like, boy, I'm an expert at seeing history repeat itself. And so I wanted to get both of your opinions as to how this is going to go forward, because there's a good portion of the disclosure movement, in my opinion, that's just trying to push this sideways. And it's like, no, I'm all for raising vibration and positivity. I agree with that, but that they're wholly ignoring the darker stuff. And what solutions you guys might have for that?
Well, Ileana?
I host my own show. I choose my own guests who I want to interview, and I look at the abduction aspects, I look at the SSP aspects, I look at the healing aspects. So I basically will interview anyone who I think is genuine on all of these aspects. And my mission is to get the truth out through interviews, through having a wider audience. And again, I don't limit one topic or one thing. My channel covers broadly all of these things. And I connect to people all over the world to interview anywhere. And I do it through digital media like this. Honestly, going to conferences and knocking on doors is like trying to break a brick wall. All of these researchers, these scientists, these people are all at the conferences, and every year it's the same old thing. And I am not into the same old thing of excluding SSP experiencers or abductees or contactees. All of them are put in the same batch of people: contact experiencers, SSP experiencers, abductees. Where's the evidence? Where's the proof? You got to prove it. Where's your videos? Where's your images? If you can't prove the science of any of your story, how any of this tech works, you're not being taken seriously, no matter what you do. So it's really about hosting your own shows, like what Penny and I do, having the guests on. Also, not just experiencers, but also people like you, John, with a different perspective, like being inclusive and welcoming of everyone who has something important to share and say for the disclosure movement. So honestly, I don't go to any of these things physically. I use my time wisely, and I interview digitally, and it's out quickly, it's edited, it's out. People all over the world can read it, listen to it, see it, and the info is out for the whole public to know. I don't put things behind paid walls. Everything is out in the open. So that's my way of contributing to disclosure. It's not the conferences, it's the shows that make the difference.
I've never been to one, and I don't, I'll toy with the idea of going to one, if only to see Penny and Eric and maybe some other people, if it does happen for Penny. But I certainly wouldn't talk or anything like that. I would just go and observe. But my general feeling throughout my 60 years of life is, there's a lot of hot air and a lot of the same old stuff. And, it's I think Penny said it correctly, in that the disclosure movement is kind of eating itself. It's factionalized, just like the deep state is. There are factions everywhere, and there's no way to unite the factions. And so, going forward, everyone seems to sort of want to do their own thing, which I think is probably wise. But there'll be a turning point.
What I'm seeing right now is a pushback from the powers that be. A lot of our channels are being deleted from YouTube. A lot of the separate websites have been shut down under excuse of copyright violations, or because they were considered extremist, without that ever being defined. And it's to the point where we're being forced behind paywalls just to pay, in my case, the bandwidth. I recently had enough donations to buy my own server, but I found out it's going to cost money every month to have this server online because it still has to be connected to the internet. Well, I'm on Social Security disability, and yes, I get donations, but they're not something that I can bank on because every month it's a different amount. And so when I set up this server, it's going to have to be behind a paywall to pay for the bandwidth. And it's not that I'm trying to exclude anyone. It's simply I have to pay the internet. And I'm trying to keep the cost as low as possible and still do that. So I have been one of those that everything I did was available to the public. I've been public for 5 years. My show and my YouTube channel are about documenting the disclosure movement. Everyone in the community, whether they're researchers who think I'm personally full of shit, or whether it's experiencers, some of whom have some really dramatic stories that I wonder, were they real or were they nightmares? And then there are people that every time you talk to them, it's like they've woken up to a new day. And I've been interviewing these people, and I've been interviewing people who have had ongoing interaction with various extraterrestrials. The ones that I'm most acquainted with are the folks who have interacted with Jahami, the folks historically known as Anunnaki. And there's a lot of argument in the community over where those people came from. But they are still the gods of Earth's history. So this is what I've been trying to do. Now, I have spoken at, 3 conferences, and I went to one before that to find out what they were about. I go to conferences because otherwise people show up at my door. If I give them a once-a-year opportunity to meet me in person, they don't feel as compelled to show up at my house. This isn't as big of an issue for men. I'm a 65-year-old woman. I have spinal injuries. I really don't want a total stranger who thinks he's in love with me, who thinks he's having a telepathic love affair with me, to show up at my door.
Yep.
That's frightening.
Yep. I agree with you, Penny. I had an almost client who wanted psychic reading sessions with me. He's in Germany, and he fell in love with me. Like, oh, she's this, she's great. And I referred that person to a different healer, a male healer. And that male healer is still having issues telling that person to leave me alone. And I had to write emails. I'm like, look, I will report you to the police, to the German and the Canadian police, if you don't leave me alone. I do not share your feelings, and I do not reciprocate your feelings of love and wanting to physically come and live with me and for me to train you on your abilities. I'm not interested. I don't want you as a client. I don't want you emailing me. Block the person everywhere. And now I recently hear that he's back obsessing over me again. So it's like, they listen to these interviews and they build up for themselves that we're some kind of goddesses, you know, that we have something more special than anybody else, and we don't. Our experiences are interesting.
We're human beings who have been through hell and survived, and we're talking about it because we want the hell stopped for others.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that somebody has to focus in on us and get attached emotionally to us as if we can provide them with what they need, because we can't.
Hey world, I have a partner. We have been living together for 20 years and he is stuck with me. And nobody else is going to be in that position, so don't even think about it.
Yeah, and I'm very happily not interested in men at the moment. I'm interested in women. So I'm openly bi, and right now I have no interest in men, so that my German stalker can now know he needs to look for somebody else to attach himself to. I'm not interested.
Well, if it helps, I promise to stop obsessing over you two goddesses.
Oh, well, you can admire.
Thing, you know.
Yeah, you can admire from afar.
Yeah,
just don't. Yeah.
I did get a guy who on the email. I've had a bunch of people email me, but this guy only wanted to talk about Liz Taylor and UFOs. He claimed he could talk to her, you know, through the astral, and I had to kind of block him after a while.
Yeah.
You know,
she was your stepmom, wasn't she?
What?
She was your stepmom for a while, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was a great person. You know, she cared about people. She cared about people with AIDS, and she did believe in UFOs and ET. I talked with her about it all through the 70s. She saw one with Eddie Fisher off the coast of California, and she said it was doing zigzags and shot straight up out to space. You know, she believed all that. She was a bit of a conspiracy theorist, as was my mother, or my mother still is. She's 84. So they were a great influence upon me back when I was a teenager. They really were. But yeah, I mean, anytime you put yourself out there, you're gonna get people coming out of the woodwork with hats with the propellers on them, and
well, this is actually why I go to conferences, is so they have an opportunity to press the flush without showing up at my house.
Yeah, and certain people, because I do energy healing, I do psychic readings, I do a lot of different things energetically, and once I started reading the emails, I could see the profile of this male client potential. Oh no, this is a lovelorn person. You got to gently talk them down and remove them from the sphere of contact immediately, because I could see the obsession. I could see the male aspect of, I like her energy. I like what she's talking about. I'm very attracted to that. I must go and physically meet her and offer myself to meet her so she can mentor me. And I said to him, I'm not interested in you physically leaving Germany and coming to my country, because I'm not interested in you as a man. I'm not attracted to you. No means no. And this person was still like, yeah, no means yes, I'm coming. And I'm like, no, you're not. Stay in your own lane. Stay in your own country. I don't share your attraction.
No means yes is one of the worst things that I've ever had to deal with.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a young man.
The other thing that I've had to deal with is because so many people watch my videos, listen to the network, and this show is being aired on the American prison system. So every prisoner in the United States will get to listen to this at some point. So when you're dealing with a population that a proportion of them are psychic, and they're listening to your voice, they make connection. And because they have made connection, they think there's a bond there that isn't. And I have taken up putting up so many layers of shielding, and most of it's mirrored. So if they get through the worst parts, all they do is see themselves. So I'm hoping that themselves are ugly enough they don't want to go farther.
Well, and I just project the energy. I'm a strong, dangerous woman. If you think you want something from me and I don't want it, you ain't getting it. That's it. There's this strong projection of no means no. And if you insist otherwise, think again. no, that's not happening. So that's what I project in my responses to people who think they have an attraction to me.
There. I see his face. He's like, you guys have been victimized.
Oh, I'm not victimized. Yeah. I'm not victim.
I have been, yes. I have had them show up at my door more than once, and the neighbors have actually clustered around them and refused them access to my door.
Yeah. Well, my home has external cameras, so I can see who's coming a mile away. I have my firearms, and I have my laser taser. So anyone who insists on coming...
You have talked about your collection of weapons before, yes.
If somebody insists on a visit that's not authorized, they'll be lasered and tasered and taken to the hospital and physically removed by any means necessary. So,
I'm old school. I have assault weapons and machine guns.
Yes.
But I don't want to shoot anybody.
No, I don't either.
I sure as hell scared them away.
I'm old school, but I'm smart enough not to say on air what I do or do not have.
Well, it's been said before and implied before, so I don't use guns and violence as force, but, you know, if somebody's coming your way and invading your personal space, a little laser taser won't hurt them. It'll just drop them and make them go to the hospital for a little psych eval and a visit to recuperate. So, I mean, I've had stalkers email me wanting to come over and chat and stuff, and I'm like, think again, buddy. You'll be lasered and tasered. That's my response.
I have banned people on Facebook and on YouTube because they were telling the whole world, anyone who would listen, that they were having a telepathic love affair with me.
What does that even mean?
You've heard the term astral sex.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
That's what they
I've
think
never heard
they're
of it.
doing.
I've never heard of it, and now I can't forget it.
It's that special experience,
you, John.
Well, you know, our dreams are very interesting, and that's all takes place in the astral, I believe.
Most of it,
we've all had those. I've had, I've done everything in the astral in my dreams. I just had a dream last night or the night before where, even though I was a racing driver, I came over a hill going very fast in a car, and my brakes were out, and I went through the guardrail over a cliff, and the car went into the water, but I popped out of my body and was hovering over the water, and I thought, wow, that was cool. But it's true. I mean, in the astral world, I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I cheated on my wife in my dreams. That's not good. But it's always I think it's always a learning experience. Things, I have very strange dreams like everyone else, but it's like, what did I learn from that shit? But there's something in there we'll need. Sometimes I'll have an experience in today's times, and I'll remember a dream from 25 years ago, and I thought, shit, I dreamed this. That's pretty poor psychic, thanks a lot. But I remember that I had a dream about it. And so I think it's a way of your higher self telling you, my higher self calls me dummy. It says, hey, dummy, in 10 years, you need to start understanding these things. So when later on, you won't freak out over them.
Yeah, but these astral telepathic communications or sexual experiences, it's like these people think that they're interacting with you in the real world in that environment, and they become so attached and attracted, they don't know the difference between astral reality and physical reality. To them, it's one and the same. So then they need a mental jolt to get them out of that reality and say, buddy, that ain't happening in any reality, whether astral or physical. That's just not energetically there. That's something that you think is there, but it's not, because the other person is not reciprocating your telepathic call to action. to that attraction. It's not
Oh.
there.
I think what
That's
happens
one
in the
of-
astral stays in the astral.
That's one of the things that I've had the most trouble with, because where you've been doing the readings on people, Ileana, I was doing peer counseling for 7 years now. And the biggest problem that I see in the people who are coming to me as a group is they cannot tell the difference between dream state and memories, especially memories from a physical reality that isn't on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming to me with astral fantasies. They're coming to me with sheer dreams that are not even about what they think it's about. And they're trying to present it to me as SSP memories. But they're not calling them memories. It's, well, I had this dream. What do you think it means? And I go,
Well,
what did you have for dinner?
yeah, well, that's
what meds did you take before you went to bed? And they get really offended, but that's where a lot of these are coming from.
well,
And they get really offended because they'll talk to me for 6 months and I will not verify their dreams as having anything to do with reality. It's not a memory until the dreamer says it's a memory.
yeah, well, I have those people too that try to distinguish, was it a dream, was it a memory, was it an experience? I say we can look at it in hypnosis and figure out which it was, whether it was real or not. So
yeah. I don't do hypnosis for people.
I do that to differentiate reality from something else, whether that was a physical experience somewhere off world, whether that was a true dream, or whether it was a fantasy that happened in someone's mind. I really go deep in the hypnosis to figure out which one was it, whether it can be validated, verified, or not. If it's a dream that they had and they have a question whether that was real or not, we look at it in the hypnosis. And if it was a dream, it was a dream, and we'll figure that out because it has no merit in physicality. A dream doesn't have any merit. There's nothing there behind it of physical substance. It's part of an energetic experience.
If it's a dream, even if it's a recurring dream, it does not make you a secret space program veteran.
True. Well,
I'm not going to tell somebody they were unless they have active memories.
Yeah, agreed.
And even if they were, they shouldn't be public. It's dangerous to be public.
Well, unless you take the heat with whatever you disclose. You take responsibility for what you say on air live.
Yeah.
And I make it no secret what I'm trained in, what I've done, how I've lived my life. I've said these things before publicly, so
there
it's
are
nothing
some
new.
of my alters I don't talk about because the agencies they work for are dangerous.
For
and
sure.
I will probably end up killed if I do talk about them.
Can we talk about the UAP stuff and the Tic Tacs and what's going on with this? Full disclosure, John, you're personally involved with some of the people like Chris Mellon.
It was a nothing burger. It was a double, triple nothing burger. I mean, the UAP report was laughable.
Oh, I sat and belly laughed over it. I get to the end and it's, well, we have 1%. We don't know what they are.
They're talking a lot, but saying nothing. And there is a lot of pushback. I agree with you, Penny. It does seem like there's a lot of pushback. People are getting thrown off YouTube, and otherwise. It's just, I think probably they're going to do this alien false flag operation, fake alien invasion thing.
The one that Randy Kramer talks about?
Yeah, Von Braun had mentioned about it, and Greer talks about it all the time. And
Greer's afraid of it. I know people that are involved with Official First Contact, and it's scheduled for this fall. And the ETs involved in it have said if there's a false flag that they will not come and be part of official first contact.
Yeah.
So we're kind of on a time frame. If they're going to do it, they need to do it before we make contact.
You know, there's been so many first contacts, but they're all classified.
This one is supposed to be wide open to the public, wherever it is, and not with the government. And I think they're talking about Australia.
Well, good luck. Trying to get most of the world won't even believe it.
No, they won't.
And that's why, I mean, as a very crude solution, it's like a false flag alien operation. At least everyone, most everyone would kind of be on the same page, where it's not still arguing. Like these physicists I'm talking to, they want proof of ET. They don't even believe it. I mean, it's madness. The limited thinking that goes around is just endemic.
It's not limited thinking. There is an official point of view on everything. And if you don't subscribe to the official point of view, you don't get funding, you don't get hired. You are literally deplatformed. And so any opening that you would chisel through their armor, they're going to fill that chink back up real fast so they can continue to stay working in their field.
Right. But there is limited thinking. I mean, there are some very, very smart people who are just like brilliant. And then you talk to them about this stuff and they're like, no.
They can't.
They just can't grasp it.
Even the people, okay, when you talk to people about pesticides, there have been studies done, and some of these studies are turning out to have been faked. But as long as those studies are still the official word, even though they were faked, the people who are the chemists and the biologists working in that field are not allowed to say anything different. This was one of the things, I believe it was atropine. Atrazine, I'm sorry. Atrazine was the chemical that was found to change boy amphibians into girl amphibians. And it was found to have the same effects later on reptiles, and they haven't tested it any further because the company who makes it went to such lengths to deplatform the scientists who did the amphibian studies. So you have work that's being done that shows the official story isn't true, but the people who are doing it are punished big time. So this is in every field.
No, I agree. I mean, I see it in the history field with archaeologists and everything. I mean,
yeah, it's in the history field. It's in physics.
Oh yeah.
Relativity was never true.
I know, and
but it took people off of Tesla's electronics, which was true.
There's also the possibility, instead of a false flag alien invasion, there's the possibility of designer aliens. And that's something Planetary Corp actually had discussed, because they make human ET hybrids. They can make Nordics, they can make anything ET, like with ET genetics, and present it to the world as, hi, we're here to make contact, meet the Nordics. So they can do that easily, and those are designer aliens.
Something else I wanted to toss in is all of the videos that I have seen that were UAPs that were being released by the military. They were all Solar Warden tech.
Yep, or Planetary Corp tech.
None of them were ET.
Nope.
They were humans who are already in space.
Yes.
And no, it's not the Earth military, so they're technically telling the truth when they say it's not ours.
Right. But isn't the Tic Tac back engineered from the tall whites out at Indian Springs and S4?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Charles Hall described their Tic Tac looking ships. And of course, I don't know if it took them 50 years to back engineer that technology or whether they had to negotiate for it. Probably both. But
The tall whites had to negotiate to keep their base, and part of that negotiation was a constant drip, drip, drip of tech. So why not share the tech that was in the human's face?
Right.
And there's some news. Planetary Corp gave Space Force TR-10s recently because they have to work with Earth Defense Force, Space Force. TR-10s, the craft, the bigger, larger versions of TR-3s and 6s.
Got it.
But bigger ones where you could have thousands of personnel on the craft, and they've been fitted with beyond the speed of light FTL engines. So that was recently given to Space Force because Space Force is now a legitimate space program, Earth-based program with its own classification.
It was Earth Defense Force made legal.
Yes, exactly. They're working with Earth Defense Force. So they're now two combined entities, which gives them more freedom and autonomy and gives Solar Warden more opportunities to get out of the solar system and branch out with its stuff.
I want to say something here, and it's not meant to offend you, Ileana, but there is a person out there who has attacked her and I both. And he was on a show for a while, and a lot of people know his name, and I'm not going to say it, and I hope you don't either.
No.
But I will say, during his first season, what he shared about SSP was correct, because he had gotten it from people on Project Avalon, which is a website for experiencers. He had done his homework there and had found the stories of the real people who had been in these programs. And so that first season, he was telling the truth. Not his truth, because he was never one of us. But what he talked about with the technology, what he talked about with where the people are, what he talked about that Solar Warden did, those were all correct. Not that he did them, but that first season, until he started talking about Anshar, he was telling the truth. And the Anshar are totally made up. And the Blue Avians were from
Ashiana Dean's
Ashiana Dean. So yeah, we can tell you exactly where he pulled everything. So
and the Anshar are based on Agartha beings. So there are Agartha beings that
I've never interacted with the
Agarthas. I have. And some of those beings are energetic vampires. Some of them are wonderful beings. There's all kinds of beings in Agartha. So the Anshar are actually somewhat real. They are a parasitic, energetic group of
I picked that
Agarthas.
up from how he described them.
Yeah. Well, they are parasitic. They are very, they take you in. They make you feel part of them. And they drain your energy out of you, and you're all drained of energy. And they present to themselves as beautiful sexual beings. That's how they hook you in. So we saw all of this unfolding on the show. And every time the women were more beautiful, more sexy, these Anshar and others. So it just got so sexualized. It wasn't funny.
Well, that's one of the problems whenever people start talking about these things, is you start getting questions about the sex life. Well, like any other military, if you have men who are in service and away from their families, and you have women who are serving beside them, there's going to be a lot of, well, some of the relationships might actually be welcomed, but most of them are, the women are being required to be prostitutes. That's the underlying reality that I lived, was I was assigned. And that's supposed to be against the rules in Nacht, Waffen, but it's common practice anyway. And if you listened to my interviews with Joseph Powell, he describes what he did to me as my commander when I said no. So it's not like we really have the right to say no.
Planetary Corp, you don't fraternize with the ones you work with, who are directly who you work with, your superiors or below. You just don't sexually fraternize. You don't do that on the basis. So there's a policy, and you're not supposed to do that. You don't do that. So that never happened to me.
The Germans out there discovered that men who have sex on a regular basis are more productive. And the policy is based on that.
Planetary Corp, you're productive based on the job you do and how well you can do it, not your sexual inclinations, prowesses, or anything of that nature. So I guess the value system is different. Sex is just something that's done recreationally and has no meaningful purpose other than to blow off steam in Planetary Corp. So what you do in your off hours, as long as you don't do it with somebody that you work with closely, so that's the rule.
On a ship, you don't have any options.
Yeah. Well, the base, the cybernetic slabs and the Mars bases have both male and female personnel. So you're just not allowed to fraternize with the ones that you work with directly. So that's a big no-no. That was always a big no-no. So you could, what you do in your off time is your business, but you don't do it with your colleagues, was the rule, the major number one rule. That
actually surprises me, because that's not the way corporations on Earth operate.
Well, Planetary Corp likes productive little assets, and they like people who follow the rules, who do what they're supposed to, and it's regimented. Mm-hmm. Just like in the military, you don't sleep with your coworkers who you're out in the field with. You just don't do that in the Marines. You don't do that in the Navy. That's a big no-no. So it's saying that's how that corporation is run. The team you work with is the team you work with. You don't do personal things with them on the clock or off the clock. That's your team who you work with. That's how that is. So we followed that rule, and we were productive, and we worked as units in the cybernetic slabs and on the base too, or bases. So John, can you comment on that?
Well, I'd rather not.
No, in terms of military and how that's set up.
I think it's, you know, they're allowing women. I think there was a woman officer on the USS John Warner submarine, and she was one of the first, I believe, which I think is a progressive thing. Mm-hmm. However, you know, all your points that you two made are valid. Another issue is, since the vibration of love is the most powerful thing in the universe, boys and girls together in stressful situations, you know, Mother Nature's going to go the way she wants. I think it's very difficult sometimes in the military. My stepson and stepdaughter, you know, they're married. I don't know what you call them. He was a Marine, she was Army. That's how they met. Now, they weren't in the same service together, but they met somehow. They were working on an IT project. And, you know, and they were warned off, but love is love. I mean, sometimes there's no stopping that. And so
yeah, I got into lots of trouble because I would actually form attachments.
Yeah, we're human. That's what happens. I mean, you know, In my book, I write about two female characters because, I grew up with two sisters, a mother, stepmother, and they have some issues with their team members. And it's and I mean across the aisle, one's British, one's German. They're enemies, but it happens.
Yeah.
I wanted to end my book on a happy note. This one is much shorter, and it is. I mean, the vibration of love is all powerful, and it's sort of a sub theme in the book going forward. Even though there's all this war and tragedy and heartbreak, it's like, well, sometimes there's, at the end it can work out, but it is something I don't think you can stop. Corporations make those rules all the time. They never work. I mean, human beings are just very social and very, loving, even though we're manipulated by regressives and others.
Well, Planetary Corp, I remember there was no feelings of love. There was just, you do your job, you're proficient at what you do, you reach your efficiency peaks, and you have some off time. You don't really engage in anything that you're not supposed to. And if you do have some kind of a relationship, it's private, you don't talk about it, it's not seen, it's not heard. That's how it is in that corporation. So there's no real love involved.
But you need
How
to,
did they
you
do
need
that
to
artificially?
Yeah,
Artificially?
There's no
artificial.
love.
That's artificial because they're all of these factions implant their people with mind control devices that if we get too far out of hand, then we get a seizure. And if we get really too far out of hand, our heads explode.
There's just, what I would say, Planetary Corp, men, women, assets, there's emotional neutrality. It's like you're emotionally neutered, really.
And that's efficient for work, but
yes,
yeah.
But that's how it's done on these bases, 24/7. You don't really attach yourself emotionally to other people, and you don't fall in love on those bases. It's military-run corporations. That's what that is. So that's how it's run. That's what I remember as how that was built, and it worked. There weren't personal attachments. There weren't any lovey-dovey things. You were a cog in the wheel, and you did what you were supposed to. You did your mission, you did your work, and that's how I remember it as.
I wonder if militaries on Earth are moving towards that.
It's efficient and proficient. There's no messy emotion. There's no messy traumas.
Then you're taking the ethics out of the equation too, because that's an emotion.
Yeah.
Well, ethics is you don't
just turning into a robot in a body instead of in a robot form.
No, not a robot, just emotionally dampened so that you can be efficient in doing the job that you're there to do. So that's military grade, how that operation is run. Again, people can still have a relationship. It's just can't be seen or heard. It's very private, and that's how it stays. You're not seen out and about with the one that you're with. So it's very robotic in some ways, and it's very...
Where my experience in Nacht Waffen was that I would be on a ship, and since I was a female officer, I was usually the mistress of one of the officers above me. And if I was not chosen to be a mistress, then I was assigned to service other officers. Since I was an officer, I was not allowed to fraternize with the enlisted.
Oh, when I worked in the cybernetics labs, you worked with teams or you worked alone, male, female, you worked with both genders. You are not to fraternize with your team, who you work with. So that was a huge no-no. And like Penny said, if you do, then you might have a nosebleed, you might have a seizure. So the implants could mind control emotional dampening to a certain extent, and as well as physical pain. If it was needed, if somebody was out of line and emotionally engaging with someone they shouldn't, those measures would be activated and enforced. But there wasn't any, like, you're an officer, you're an SSP asset, you're assigned to be a mistress to somebody. Planetary Corp doesn't do it that way. For them, it's about work efficiency and meeting work quotas. That's the end game of the technology, whatever you're doing. That's what you're supposed to do. It's not about emotional feelings or love or procreation. It's about doing your duty and your work. That's just how it's run.
The breakaway-driven civilization is very patriarchal, and while they give lip service to the divine feminine, it's actually more patriarchal than we have on Earth.
Well, there's this movie called Voyagers that recently came out, which has some interesting disclosure. So the Earth, is running out of resources, running out of living space. So NASA is training new type of humans, little children who are going up into space in a ship. They're traveling to another solar system. They'll get there in 60, 80 years, whatever, right? So while these kids are now grown-up teenagers on the ship, they're drinking the blue liquid that suppresses their emotion. So they don't interact with each other sexually or on an emotional level. So it's suppressing emotion. So that's a bit of disclosure, the perfect soldier, the perfect cog, because there are medications, there are different minerals and things that can suppress emotion. So they make you a perfect little soldier, and that's what Planetary Corp does to its assets. It makes you emotionally neutral.
Just for the audience, Planetary Corporations is the same entity that we have known traditionally as the military industrial complex.
Yes, it is.
So this is so people know who we are talking about.
Yeah. So that movie Voyagers, it really is disclosure of how Planetary Corp makes its SSP assets. When I watched that movie, I'm like, yeah, that's how I was emotionally when I was working for them. I was emotionally neutral. Like, I'm not easily tempted by relationships, by love, by sex. I'm not tempted by those desires, even to this day. That's not what rules me. Very logical and very just like, I am my own person, and I'm not easily tempted by anyone or anything to this day.
It's interesting because I think movies give out little tidbits of disclosure, but they're infuriating because it's all mixed with bullshit. Like
Yes.
60 years to get to the nearest star. What is it? That movie Interstellar. I got up in that movie and walked out. It's bullshit.
We can get from New York City to Mars in about 20 minutes, and I did it in 1964.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was real in Voyagers was drinking the blue substance, and emotionally it suppresses you. So you do not fraternize with the genders. It's co-gender, but you don't fraternize with them. That sexual thing, that love thing, that's suppressed emotionally. That's what the real disclosure was in Voyagers, in terms of how Planetary Corp deals with its assets and how their military bases and labs are run. So that's a little bit of truth in that movie.
Well, now this is a question for both of you because, my wife and I have many discussions on what disclosure really is. And I have to say, over the last 20 years, and because of this bullshit UAP report and all the pushback and everything, it's kind of like, I give her an analogy. It's like we're on a hill watching the biggest train wreck in human history, and there's not a goddamn thing we can do about it, except be there for people after the wreck. But I kind of see disclosure going forward, disclosure, quote unquote, as being just sort of, initiatives that sort of normalize technology A, B, and C another 10 years normalize this 5 years, then normalize that, and really not disclosing much. Yeah, sure, they might disclose ET, but it's like, hey, no, we're our problem. They're our friends, and there's only one race, and don't worry about it, and it sort of normalized everything so that in 30 years, when my grandson's 37, it'll be a world where, oh, sure, everything's hunky dory, and go to work for Planetary Corp or the ICC, and it normalized all this.
And that's the plan. That's
what
the plan,
I've
exactly.
been seeing is more of an official dogma that Americans are good and Germans are bad, that Pleiadians are good and reptilians of all kinds are bad, and that there is no room for deviation.
Oh no, people hate it when things are too complex. They love everything black and white and simple.
Yeah, there's already a dogma attached to it. And that's part of the pushback that I'm getting, is because I'm turning that on its head and saying everybody out there are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what country their people came from in the first place. So, there was a time that Ileana and I would not have been allowed to talk to each other because I'm American and she was born in Ukraine.
Does that stop me? No, I talk to whoever I want.
That hasn't been that long ago, is what I'm saying.
True.
So, the dogma shifts a little bit, but it does so over such a length of time that when you are talking to someone, like I'm speaking with Ileana, and I've spoken with Yuri Lear, and I've spoken with Alexander Cherkasov. I did an entire podcast set with Alexander Cherkasov. There was a time that I would have been run into prison for that because he's a translator for the Russian government.
For a Russian spy.
That I've had people tell me he was a Russian spy, which I think is just total bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, he came to me and he says, you have more following in Russia than you do in America. And I'm going, how the hell did that happen?
All Americans view Russians as spies and Cold Warriors. It's ridiculous. But the Russians,
they're
much more open to all this.
They're open to all of this. They're warm. They're friendly. I talk to them and their eyes don't glass over.
No.
Well,
that tells you how much programming we have in the United States.
Yeah, Project
most
Blue
interviews that I do where I'm being interviewed. In the first 5 to 10 minutes, the interviewer's eyes are totally glassy. They're not hearing damned word I'm saying. And an hour or two later, they will ask me a question from that first 5 minutes because they haven't heard anything since.
Well, what I liked about Project Blue Book, that show that had 2 seasons.
I wasn't able to see that.
Yeah.
It wasn't on a platform that I subscribed to.
Well, what I liked about it is that the Americans were spying on the Russians, what the Russians knew about the UFOs, and the Russians were spying on the Americans, what the Americans knew about UFOs and that technology. So both were looking at each other and spying on each other, who knew what. They could have just, been open and like, this is what I know about UFOs. This is what I know about UFOs. And share the info.
National security.
Exactly.
I understand that the red phone in the White House and the Kremlin was because they finally figured out that the UFOs were somebody else, and they decided we better have a phone call to say that's not one of ours.
Yeah, my dad worked on that, and in 1972 during the SALT missile talks, part of what's not really public was they set up a teletype system between us and the Russians that was instantaneous. And so why it took so long for that to happen, I don't know.
The McCarthy era.
Yeah, McCarthy eraism, but stupidity really, because we were always cooperating with the Russians on the deeper levels as far as UFOs and ET tech, always. But they kept the generals and admirals fighting the Cold War to cover it all up. It's pretty obvious.
They were fighting the Cold War so they'd have an excuse to raise taxes to pay for the SSP.
Yeah.
And now these corporations don't need Earth funding. They have their own infrastructures and they run themselves. So they've totally separated from Earth. But eventually the accounting has to be accounted for. And when Elon Muskovich goes to space, when Bigelow goes to space, when all these Earth corporations go to space, what will they find?
When you accept that Earth is not a closed economic system and never has been, then the accounting takes on a whole new aspect. Because you have to account for this went off world.
Yes.
And has been taken out of the system.
Exactly. So we have the frontliners who are frontlining UAP, UFOs, that this is acceptable. Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Stephen Greer. They don't talk about the SSP programs. All they talk about is UFOs.
No, they always concentrate on the hardware.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to lean back. I have a terrible bad back. They only talk about the hardware. It's a distraction because
for the audience, John was a race car driver and had a horrible accident, and he's lucky he's able to walk. So we have no problem with you being comfortable on air.
Well, chronic pain is good to sharpen the mind. I'll tell you that much. I can't quite explain that, but I'm sure you'll understand.
Yeah, I do.
But yeah, they just talk about sightings and stuff like Dolan and everybody. It's like, oh, we need to talk more about the sightings. It's like the hardware is not the issue. It's the politics. It's the financial system. It's the false history. It's down the line. The hardware, big deal. Lights in the sky, all different kinds of shapes. I could give a shit. It's and they kind of distract the public on that. Like I get emails from people going, wow, some people saw a UFO. And I'm like, wow, big deal. There's millions of sightings.
The current thing is that that's a ship that's being shielded by clouds. And I'm inundated with cloud photos.
Well, the question is, who made it, who funded it, and who's piloting it? That's the question. Whose is it?
And what's the agenda? This whole thing, I came out against Chris and Lou lying to the American people. They are. I've been told that the Navy has lists of thousands and thousands of different designs. They know exactly who flies them, what race they are, where they're from. They try to find out what their agendas are, but sometimes, you can't figure that out. But
when you're dealing with beings that are hundreds of times smarter than us, it's pretty hard to find out whether you're being told the truth or being led down a gilded cage.
Yeah.
And I'm psychic. I don't know. This might sound strange, John, but I'm picking up that Chris Mellon is involved with the CIA.
Well, he is. DIA, CIA.
Yeah. And strong ties to the CIA.
I told you that.
Well, it's just the way that it is right now. His funding is coming from the CIA.
Oh, it's obvious. I just argued that today on this physicist forum. It's ridiculous. They're towing the same old yarn. Gosh, it's a mystery.
The people at the top who are invited to all of the conferences, who are invited over and over to the radio or TV shows that have the most viewers, those people are all part of that. Remember, I talked about there was a dogma. Those are the people who are pushing the dogma. Those of us who are like Ileana and I saying, hey, it's dirty out there. Hey, they're kidnapping kids for this. Hey, they're torturing children for this. This is not a closed system. Your money is not being spent on Earth. It's being taken into space. Yeah. We're the ones that are saying your dogma is wrong. So what happens? We have our YouTubes. I was blessed that Global Enlightenment Radio Network gave me a show. And in the process of that, yeah, we're trying to get me to Contact in the Desert next year. And it's going, if we make it, it will mean that the real truth will finally be at least addressed. And odds are they'll make fun of me. I've already talked to Richard Dolan once, and now he talks about on his show about this crazy woman who said she's been to Mars. When he says that, that's me.
Well, he's obviously on the take. There's no doubt about it. He was a firebrand when he was younger. You know, this is what happens to a lot of people. And I'm not pointing fingers at them because blackmail can be very dirty and dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not like, it's not a criticism. It's really just an observation. You know, Dolan only talks about childish stuff and sightings and all kinds of bland, boring stuff. You know, but he may be, you know, viciously blackmailed. I mean, it's the truth. And
well, I had a problem in November. I was talking about some of the more occult information, and I was warned, threatened, and after that I've had friends murdered. And so I'm kind of in the situation of, do I talk about everything I know because it's the truth and people need to know, or do I protect my friends by cutting back just a little bit?
Blackmail is the #1 currency in the secret space programs, actually. If they have something on you, you're owned. You're owned, so, and controllable. If you don't have anything to hide and nothing to, you know,
that's why
go behind closed doors.
That's why I'm obvious and out front about
exactly
all the bad things I've done, because then you can't blackmail me.
But, same here.
The only thing they have on me now is if I talk about certain topics, people in my world died.
Mm. Yeah, I talk about certain topics that medbeds aren't coming in, that I'm criticized. Oh, you're a fake and a fraud. I'm like, no, I'm not. Because
I know I'm telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Medbeds aren't coming today, next year, or the year after. It's a sad truth, but it's the truth.
Tanks are not coming either.
Yeah. So
they'll bring out something called a medbed, but it'll have very, very limited technology in it. And it'll help with your ingrown toenails and whatever. And then they're like, oh, see, we let it out. It's like some of the other, you know, ultrasound devices that they have in the medical community. You know, those came from, you know, back engineered projects, supposedly.
Yeah.
But it's like the public gets the watered down, childish, mamby-pamby stuff. And they're like, see, you know, you're benefiting. And it's like, not really.
If you take a look at computer tech, especially the technology that creates cell phones, all of the rest of our technology should have advanced at that same rate. Why didn't it?
Because the better copy is to be released 10 years later, not now.
Right. It's planned, you know, very planned step by step.
It's obviously planned, but I want our audience to think, why hasn't everything else kept up with cell phones?
Well, they want us enslaved to our phones for sure. They want us
Oh, yeah.
communicating. Laptops is an amazing tool. I use it every day. I'm a writer. And so they make things indispensable.
I have a desktop. I do not have a cell phone. I have an old school landline. And people think it's because I'm not computer tech savvy, but I've got I've got a desktop with 32 gig RAM. So yes, I'm running with Win 10, but
Right.
I was a DOS programmer.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. I'm old enough to remember that. But it's like in Virginia, out at my farm, they told me in 5 years they will not support landlines anymore. And so they push people into new technologies, whether you like it or not.
Well, they tried to get mine gone, but we plugged it into the router.
You want a nice cheap landline? Just get UMA. It's independent of any of those other companies. It's a hybrid landline. You could say
The radio, was it a radio signal?
It's connected to the computers. It's just connected to your computer system.
Like my actual phone is, it is a landline, but it's plugged into my router, so it's now
exactly
for internet.
It's like a little hybridized landline.
It makes it where I'm reachable when I'm not online. But if the internet is down, and it usually is at least once a week, I'm blissfully safe from all of it.
And our cell phones are like those screen tablets that certain gentlemen talked about. Remember the glass tablets, Penny?
Yeah, I knew the man who uploaded the MarsNet. I knew him. He was number 5 at Langley when I was there. I was number 7, and we went to Mars together, and he was a gifted linguist. He spoke English, German, and Russian, and he uploaded all 3 major portions of the MarsNet during his 60 and back. And on Earth, he was the NSA agent that they chose to activate my memories. And yeah, that's my major claim to fame. I'm the only one that the NSA activated on purpose. So I still don't know why, because the agents that were involved were murdered when I went public. So this round this year are not the only people who have been murdered because I'm talking. So the count is now at 7.
And people ask me all the time, why haven't I been killed for disclosing all this SSP stuff that I was involved in? John, can you answer that? Like, why are we still here?
I think they can't, they could kill us all. My wife and I we were like, fuck it, I'm not gonna not talk about things anymore. They can go ahead and just kill everyone. First of all, we reincarnate. Soul contracts and everything, it gets very complicated. But we're all here to help out. We're all here to wake up. And we're all here to do a job. And the job is nasty. And so if they start killing all of us, I don't care. I've always, grown up. I've always been hardcore. If people were 90% towards something, man, I was 110. And if everything I was doing was always shocking people, and they're like, "Why do you have to do that?" And it's like, why can't you wake up to the harsh truth of things? And by and large, people just don't want to do that.
No, they don't. They like a comfortable lie.
Yeah.
Now, as far as Ileana,
ignorance is bliss. That's my friend who always said that. And I said,
Yeah.
If the bliss is temporary, what good is it?
Um,
I don't know.
as far as Ileana put it about why haven't they killed us? I've been shot with energy weapons 10 times, and I was still speaking the truth. And they decided to break my shoulder. And it took me 2 years to be able to put that arm behind my back. I still can't tie like the bow tie on an apron. I still can't tie that. I can't braid my own hair because my shoulder won't work. But I'm still alive, so I must be a fake. And that I'm to the point when they say that it's what? I have to be dead before you believe me?
Yeah, it's stupid logic.
Well,
You know,
there have been a lot of people killed. A lot of people. There was Bill Cooper, there was Max Spears, there was Mark McCandlish was murdered in March, and they're trying to say it was a suicide. I personally have known, who else was murdered? William Whitecrow.
Yes.
He was scheduled for an interview that day. His wife went to the store. The people trying to interview him kept calling him, and he never picked up. And when his wife came home, he was dead.
Hung by a rope.
Probably. Phil Schneider, it was, he was strangled with a catheter tube, but that was suicide.
Mark McCandlish, gunshot to the head in his own home, with no evidence that he ever owned guns.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
I think
we're looking at, there's a lot of people in the community that have died. So now the expectation is if you're telling the truth, you have to be dead.
Well, that's like in the Middle Ages. If they threw a woman in a pond, if she drowned, she was innocent. But if she floats, she's a witch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing.
You're damned either way.
Yeah, I mean, I've been close to death a million times. It's like, so, for me personally, it's like my fear of death. You have to conquer that as a racing driver. You control your fear, think fast. Your reaction time. It's like, I don't care. This is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. If I die, I die doing it. And and since that time, the last 20 years, it's like, well, I'm just going to do what I feel I have to do, that I'm here to do in my soul contract. And if I die, I die. Big deal. I think people they intimidate people with fear of death. And it's like, what's death? It's the change of frequency.
Yeah, I'm not worrying about whether I die or not. I just didn't want more people I care about dying.
I mean, that's the way they'll do it. They know probably the three of us, the four of us maybe, are not afraid of death, but they'll kill people around us to intimidate us. But
Odin here has been picked up a couple of times to explain to a certain three-letter agency what my show thinks it's doing. And he has stood by me anyway. So kudos.
Yeah, and I run my show independently. I don't answer to anybody. I'm not beholden to anybody. I get to choose my guests. I get to talk about what needs to be disclosed independently. And YouTube sends me algorithms that I should do more shows about the SSP.
Yay!
Google likes that. The more the better, please.
Why do certain people get thrown off, like Carrie Cassidy and a couple other people?
She was mixing politics into hers.
Yeah.
So was Laura Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Not only does Laura mix politics, but she also heavily mixes religion and politics as one.
Yeah, there's the 3 C's on YouTube. No politics, no religion, no guns, no violence. If you
Yes.
and no C or J, no C or J as well.
Oh,
Yes. Well, we know what
body
that is.
parts.
No. The C as in, that special V thing, the virus.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
and the jabby, the J,
I,
the
I
jabby, the
had,
V.
I've had shows that I could not upload to my YouTube because they were about the C and J.
Mm-hmm.
And the guests probably got all upset. Once I get my server running, I'll have them on there, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to put them on someone else's platform.
Yeah, I just don't talk about those things. That way I'm still up and about where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah,
It's so weird. I mean, nothing makes sense. It's like, why is
I
something
I
taboo and
have
others not?
tried to avoid both religion and politics on my show
Me
because
too.
I'm documenting a community.
Yeah.
And there are members of the community that are all points of the political and religious spectrums, and it's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have people in space? Yes. Does their politics matter? No.
No,
Do their religious beliefs matter? No.
no. It's their disclosure history that we want to talk about and disclose.
Exactly. And if they're a researcher, why are they dissing experiencers? Because researchers have nothing without experiencers.
Well, I was a researcher first. I worked for a library, so logic and research, that's part of the backbone of who I am, and being also an experiencer. It's blending the two together and making sense of all that stuff.
Well, back when I was in college in the early 1980s, I was pre-med microbiology with a chemistry co-major. And I worked in a biology lab. And even though I was an undergrad, I was the one he sent to the library because this was before everything was on the internet. And it would be my assignment to go read the list of articles he gave me and write the abstract for each of them so that I could bring back a handwritten abstract and he would know which article he actually needed to read.
By the way, I always love it when people say, "Oh, I don't believe all that stuff's happening in space," and it's like,
Why?
are you forgetting you live on a giant sphere flying around the solar system in space? We all live in space. People have this
You would be
the Earth
shocked.
reality.
You would be shocked how many people on social media are flat earthers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe in an alternate universe, but it's really not important right now.
I've seen it from space, and it's
round.
It's round, but it's
round.
lumpy like a potato. And
Yes.
the Pacific Ocean side is a little bit flatter than the rest.
How are we supposed to have a 3D environment that we live in if it's a flat Earth? That's a 3D reality is this 3D reality. It's not flat.
Everything else is round. Why would Earth be flat?
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm in the hamburger theory,
If we lived in 1D, perhaps it was flat, but we're in 3D, so it's not flat, people.
Actually, we're in 3D with the fourth dimension of time.
Yes, that's true. But again, 3D is not a flat thing. It's not a pancake.
I did a circle on purpose because time is cyclic.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think it's a lot of it is just distraction, because I was on a history forum for many years, and finally I just gave up because out of 3,000 people, there might have been a dozen decent minds, and everyone was there to look up flat Earth, Tartaria, and mud floods. And whether or not it's conscious or unconscious, it's just
The
It's
conference
ridiculous.
that I have been speaking at the last, two or three times I've been, Flat Earth, Tartaria, and mud floods have been the biggest things there. That's what I'm competing with. I'm sitting there listening to these people and going, oh my God.
Or number 4, the solar flash.
Oh yeah,
It's coming.
You know, I think there may be, you know, there some sort of counterintelligence scheme to distract everyone's mind with this crap. And it's like, you know, I asked, what was it? I had a girlfriend one time long ago, and she was very religious. Every time I asked her a deep question, she would always say, "We're all seeds in God's hands. We're all seeds in God's hands."
What
and finally, I was
the
like,
hell
"Where's the
does that
catch-up?" She's like, "We're all seeds in God's hands." Yeah,
What does that mean in practical terms?
I have no idea. You know, I think those topics are somewhat safe. You know, Tartaria existed. It was on old maps. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it was part of what's now Russia.
Yeah, every flood is a mud flood, so sure. But you know, everyone's like, "Oh, the world reset," you know, 10 times. It's like, I don't see any real evidence for that. And so
I don't either. I do genealogy. You know that.
intellectual power is sucked out of the room.
You know that I do genealogy because I've been working on yours as well as mine. And yes, guys.
Cell memory.
So I'm looking at this and I go, wait a minute. Yeah, I know that there are royals in my tree. Yeah, I've talked about that. But my family has records in Latin for that whole period of time that these other people are saying didn't exist.
Yeah.
Mm. Oh,
and
you guys are in.
We have records in Latin for every effing generation, going back to the fall of Rome. And because my ancestors married the Romans that were in charge, those records go back to the beginning of Rome. So that's 700 BC. I have records of my ancestors to 700 BC. So you're going to tell me that all of those were effing made up?
Well, I'm interested in my ET human genetics, so I constantly look at the energy of what makes me and where I came from in past lives, because those genetics are carried over here too. It's in the cellular memory. Mm-hmm. So we have Earth genetics and we have ET genetics, and it's more than just 100 on the scale. And people ask me, how can it be more than 100? Because you're not just one genetic source. The more past lives we've had, the more genetic ET that comes in with us when we're born with it. We don't have a cellular genetic scanner that can right now tell us what our genetic makeup is of the galactic stuff, but the SSB has those scanners and they can.
Okay, we have 2 minutes, and the host of the next show is already waiting in the room. So if you want to give a brief blurb of where you can be found. Ileana?
My website is Messages from a Star Traveler, and people can contact me at seekingthetruthInreality@gmail.com. That's my contact information.
Thank you. John?
You can contact me at my website, littleanton.com.
Thank you both for coming. I've enjoyed this.
That was fun, guys. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Odin.
Thank you.